Good evening. We're here today to talk about why sales and forecasting is important for a supply chain manager. And we should start off by talking about what is supply chain management. Supply chain management is the flow of goods and services involved in the movement of storage of raw materials, of which work in progress inventory and finished goods from point of origin to the point of consumption. Now that we know what supply chain management is, you're probably asking, what is forecasting, what does sales have to do with this? And the answer is, supply chain managers need sales records from previous years in order to forecast for demand for whatever product the company's selling. Most companies use a combination of a push and pull system. Push meaning you use forecasts from previous years' sales in order to build enough products to meet demand, where pull would be the polar opposite. It's you only manufacture what's been ordered, and you know you've actually has been purchased already by a customer. There are advantages and disadvantages of both, but since we're dealing with forecasts, we're going to be talking about a push system. In order to make a forecast as accurate as possible, you need accurate sales data. So you're asking, where do I get accurate sales data? Good question. If you go all the way down to the retail level, that would be caught at a point of sale level, kind of like if you went to Walmart and you buy something, they're capturing that data, and that data goes up the supply stream until it goes all the way back to the manufacturer, and this will enable a supply chain manager to make as accurate as possible forecasts. That being said, there are a few quote-unquote laws of forecasting, which first being, ironically enough, is that their forecasts are usually wrong. It's not an exact science, because you don't know what people are going to buy tomorrow. You can only base it off of the sales from last year. Your second law is your near-term end, meaning the more near that you forecast, if you're forecasting for next week, it's going to be more accurate than if you're forecasting from 3 months from now. You may be thinking, why is that? You have a better understanding of what's going to happen next week as far as political conditions, economic conditions, pricing. It's much easier to predict what's going to happen in the near future than it is in the further future. And if you wanted to, you can even use the analogy of the weather. If you ever check your weather daily, you'll notice that if it's Monday and you're checking your weather for Friday, every day up to Friday, you'll notice the weather temperatures will change based on the data that they're receiving. It's more accurate, and so on. Your third law is forecasts for groups of products or services, they tend to be more accurate. An example of this would be, say, a supply chain manager for BMW. Instead of forecasting for every model of that BMW produces for cars and motorcycles and all the different products that BMW produces, it would be more accurate to forecast for BMW motor just cars. and then maybe going down to a subset. We're going to do cars or SUVs, so on. If you want to do SUVs, you could do the X5 series. It's going to be a lot more accurate. The last rule would be forecasting shouldn't be a substitute for calculating values. And an example of this would be, say, let's go back to the BMW example. If production managers met every week and decided how many cars they're going to produce for the week, and instead of calculating what parts they're going to need, how many of each part they're going to need, they just forecasted what was going to be needed. They would have extra BMW cars built just because forecasted numbers aren't going to be 100% accurate. You could have just calculated, we're going to build whatever 1,500 cars this week, so we need this. Calculate how many pieces in a door, how many pieces in a rear view mirror that we're going to need, instead of just forecasting for it. It's probably one of the biggest no-nos for the forecasting laws. Next, we're going to go into digging a little deeper into forecasting and talk about the methods. There are two models, forecasting models, that supply chain managers use and planners. There's quantitative forecasting models, which are models that are measured with historical data and generate forecasts using those. Next would be qualitative forecasting models, which is basically a technique based on intuition and informed opinions. And a good example I have of qualitative forecasting is when I was a manager over at FedEx. I was on the retail side, and the accounting would get with us every year to work out our budget for the following year. And one question they always ask, because they have the numbers, they know the quantitative side, but they wanted to know, was there any large sales that happened in any of these months throughout the year that won't be occurring again? An example was PGA used to do media guides printing with us, and that happened, I think, for TPC every, I want to say spring, sometime in April. So we knew that was going to be a reoccurring revenue generator. So that wouldn't have been an exception. An example would have been someone traveling for a convention that isn't going to happen, say, the next year. So I would, let accounting know, we made this amount of sales off of this convention last year. It's the last one, or they're having it in a new area the following year. So plan for our budget to be lower, sales forecasted lower. Due to the time constraints of the presentation, we won't be able to really go into the detailed types of forecasting models, such as last period, moving range, weighted moving average, exponential smoothing, adjusted exponential smoothing, linear regression, and seasonal adjustments. But you can't run a business without forecasting and sales. It's just doomed for failure. It goes no matter what type of business it is. Planning needs sales data, and you do need to forecast to actually plan on what to build.